Good evening. I'd like to call the City of Fairhope Board and Adjustment meeting to order for November 15th, 2021. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce the board. We'll start at the end.
David Martin.
Mike Ball.
Donna Cook.
Anil Vera.
Frank Lamia.
Thank you. So our first order of business is the approval of the minutes for September 20th, 2021. Are there any corrections or omissions that anyone has seen?
Move to approve.
Okay. We have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carried. Our first order of business is BOA 21.11.
You want to make sure we move the agenda
Oh, yes.
items?
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 items on the agenda, and we're going to switch 21.13 to the very last, to 21.14. We'll go ahead of that. But there'll be a recusal on the 21.13 for myself. Okay. Our first order of business is BOA 21.11.
Thank you, Chairman. We okay? All right, this is a request of Patty Rogers requesting a 5-foot street side setback variance. This is located at the southeast corner of Pecan Avenue and the unopened right-of-way there known as Kumquat Street. Property is zoned R2. The map on the left is our zoning ordinance, so it shows the type of zoning around there. Most is R2, as you are familiar with. The image on the right is an aerial imagery, and just to kind of let you know what happened here, this property was the side yard of the house. Oh, go back, Mike. On the aerial imagery there, that was the side yard. This property has been subdivided into 2 lots. So the request, and I'll show you on the aerial here. So that is an unopened right-of-way of Kumquat. That is a street side setback is required. So Mike, if you go to the next slide, the 20-foot is the street side setback, as you all know, even if though the right-of-way is unopened, and it may be opened in the future. There have been a few requests to vacate that right-of-way through the years. Those have been denied. It's likely that becomes a drainage project for the city to work in that area. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that final product will be. But the staff has looked at this and does not see a hardship. As this board knows, we've really been asked to look at what hardships are, and as you know through our legal advice, it's about the land, size, shape, topography, not what the home looks like, especially on an empty lot. So the way we judge these projects, is there a buildable area there that can be used to build a home that's the same size and shape as those in the neighborhood? And we feel that there is enough room in what we determine the principal building area. So I'll leave room for questions. This is actually an oversized lot instead of the 75-foot. A lot of the ones we see in this area is 66-foot wide lots and under the required 10,500 square feet. This one is actually an 80-foot lot with almost 21,000 square feet. So it's much larger than standard R2. It does have a little bit of slope off in the back with a gully, but that's in mostly the rear yard, and we just feel like there's enough of the principal area still to build both a principal structure and an accessory building. So for those reasons, staff did recommend denial of this variance request, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
And I know we did receive those additional letters that were emailed.
Yes, and there was some letters within the packet, and I believe you received additional emails today from neighboring property owners And is, Clay, are you handling? Yes. Okay. Clay Adams is here representing the applicant and can also address any questions you may have.
We received 2 letters from the neighbors. Are there additional ones?
They were emailed.
There was one more email today.
Okay.
This is the one that came in today.
Okay, if the applicant would step up.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Clay Adams with Walcott Adams Burnell Architects. We appreciate the opportunity tonight to present the Rogers ideas for developing the property. I did want you to know we weren't just arbitrarily looking for a 5-foot reduction. We've spent some time with their program in designing a house. I'll show you in a little bit of that in a minute. And we've met with a civil engineer about the drainage, which is what I would consider a gully. It's a 6-foot deep if you look at the close of the contours, from a 40 to a 34 in the bottom, and it encroaches. We've met with an arborist because we feel strong about trees as always, and so do the Rogers. And of course, we met with the city. Hunter and Mike Rogers are always gracious to give us some time when we're meeting at sites. I don't know if they can do it with everyone, but it sure helps to try to figure out the parameters, and there's always some unique parameters on a Fairhope lot, as we know. So we just wanted you to know we didn't arbitrarily pick 5 feet. We went through some design work and met with them, and if I could pass this out and just walk you through this real quick, and tell you the homework we did, and flip through this. We'll be quick and get to answering any questions. Thank you. And that Patty and I might be able to answer, and we'll lead you through that real quick. Thank you for that. So, again, as discussed, we did spend some time designing and talking with Mike about all options. And just so you know, our first, on page A there, bottom right corner, has a label of A. Like the slide that Hunter put up, our lot is in red, circled, and there is I thought it was an easement, but what's the technical? It's a right-of-way, okay. And the right-of-way is in yellow, and it's interrupted by this gully, and it continues through to the south on orange, just as it does off of Pecan, and it may be a kumquat right-of-way. If you'll flip to the next one on B, what's unique is you can see that this is when I was just studying all the neighborhood characteristics and designing the house for them, I go around the other side, and it appears that this is a kind of a Fairhope lane, a one-car lane that probably doesn't meet street standards, and then it turns into almost a driveway halfway down. And it's unique in the way that they're using that easement on that side that I assume is the same. If you understand the process that Hunter said, it was we were told you could vacate it, but you have to go through a process, and if they talk to 9 or 10 department heads, however many they are, if one deems that it's valuable to the city, and Hunter mentioned that it was, then we received notice back from the city that vacating that easement, which would allow us more room, was not going to happen. So the next discussion point at the same meeting with Mike was, well, what are the possibilities and ramifications of a variance on that side yard? So if you'll turn to sheet C with me, you can see some black dots, which are some trees on our lot that we're struggling with. And if you'll turn to sheet D, you can see a street shot from Pecan. And just to orient you, the white fence on the left is about the property line, and the right fence you can see coming down on the right does not go all the way to the street, but that's about the west property line. And in this same photograph up front on the left, you can see a live oak that's really nice, healthy, and young. Behind it is a specimen magnolia, and of course, we're excited about both of those trees. We know they're going to both get much bigger and larger and push on driveways and houses. So we're being squeezed left and right by those specimen trees. And then on the right, you can see two really nice, more mature trees. And then, of course, in the rear is the gully pushing from the south. And if you'll turn the page to E just real quickly, you can see that it really is a jungle. And at some point, at the corner of a neighbor's house, when I look down, it really is 6 feet tall. And you can see how in the plan there, the contours that it opens up onto our lot, probably 30% or so in that rear yard area. So our variance request is coming from doing some design work and meeting with as many professionals as we can, being squeezed by the trees and the gullies and hoping to maintain those trees. So if you look on the next sheet F, something peculiar when we were looking, and this is what happened to be on the survey that Rogers got, and perhaps it was an old survey where somebody was looking to match fronts of houses and front yard setbacks. You can see at the top of that it says existing residence, and it's that picture of the house on the right that is actually 8 feet 9.5 inches. So they've already received a concession of probably 11 feet 2.5 inches off of that 20, and a front yard setback of 20 feet or something. We're not requesting a front yard setback. I do appreciate how important those are for views of people looking towards the bay and wind and breezes and people sitting on porches. We don't want to do that. We're trying to protect our existing trees on both sides. We're being squeezed in the middle. And what we really want to do is we're trying to get, this sounds strange, but between those two conditions in studying our plan, we're trying to get what is equal to a 66 by 132 lot when we start designing it on the facade, which is perfect in keeping with the neighborhood. We're not looking to do a 60-foot wide house. We're being squeezed east and west by the trees, and if you'll turn the page, you can see the rendering of a house that's in the 45-foot width, which is typical of what you can accomplish on a 66 by 132. We're not trying to net that 10 or 15 foot wider on the house. It's a 1.5 story, and it's very much in keeping with the neighborhood. And then quickly, last thing, and then I'll answer any questions, was we sent our package to everyone on the mailing list too. We want to be good neighbors. The Rogers do. Patty's, and they have been here since 1990. They're Fairhope people. They like all of us, love the character of the fruits and nuts and want to fit in. And they've received 2 letters, which I submit to you in that are in favor of ours, and I don't know of any that in opposition, the 3 you mentioned, but if I can answer some questions to those people, I'd be glad to do that, and of course, any questions y'all might have. And Patty, if you had anything to add to that, yes? This is Patty. Her husband, Ed, was not able to be here, but wanted to tonight due to travel. And again, we appreciate your consideration, and if we can answer some questions.
What's the hardship?
Now, here, in my opinion, if we are clearing these sites and losing the vegetation to design the house they want, the quality of the fruits and nuts is not about the architecture, and I'm an architect. It's about the quality of the vegetation, and we don't want, so we're being squeezed between specimen trees, and if y'all been by the site, you will know that oak and that magnolia are, and the mature trees on the right, they're not 75-year-old water oaks that are rotten and going to fall any day. We're being squeezed along with the rear yard, so we think it's the trees, the vegetation, and the rear yard of the gully, and we also think that a concession's been made to similar on both the easement and the setback on adjacent property. So that's just our analysis of trying to digest everything we see and explain it to an owner about the development of their property.
The two oaks, the mature oak, I've been to the site. The two,
Right.
they're practically on the west property line.
No,
so-
sir, they're on the plan, you can see where we locate on sheet C. But if grading-wise, you can't, again, we do a lot of residential architect in the fruits and nuts and everywhere, but if you're trying to make sure the tree is healthy, you do want to put, a driveway on those with fill and stay away from that tree. You're actually reducing the 20-foot side yard to a greater amount when you develop on that side. And we've done the plan and the layout of driveways on both sides and studied grades and nobody wants to enter a garage 7 steps up from the house. If you're putting the driveway on that side, the grade is 4 foot lower than the upper, and if you're picking the house up on the east side with a conventional or slab on grade, it's got to be 1 or 2, or with a conventional frame, it's got to be 3 feet above ground by code. Then you're creating a 7-foot difference. So if you pick your driveway up, put a retaining wall, you're putting more pressure on those oaks on the west. Crossways, this is a partial contour map, I believe, that shows the contours in the rear for the gully, which was a big design issue. But if you look back at the picture, from the east side to the west side across that slope, you can kind of see it in the at the last contour shown on the gully. They just didn't do a topo on the entire. It slopes, you see those 4 contours back there by that lone oak. That's about the same way as is up front, so it slopes about 4 feet from east to west on there.
Where do you think the finished floor is going to end up in relation to?
And that's, the hard part is, what I think is, what we always like to do, and we may not always do it right, is you come in on the high side, and so your garage can be at that grade, and your house is up a little. If you come in down here, then you got to pick the driveway up or keep the garage down, then you're going to traverse a bunch of steps. So I don't know that it's always right, but generally as architects, we bring that driveway in on the
high side.
The high side and use it, and also a little swale on the other side, the landscape buffer to move the water, or in this case, all that water flows from east to west down all of these streets towards the bay. That's what that gully is handling, But we see it as being, we haven't gotten that far with Ed and Patty, but many clients are fixated on a conventional versus a slab. With a slab, you might be 2 feet out, and the front porch looks greater because of the 4 foot, and that looks nice. With a conventional, by code with clearance, you're required to be 3, but 2 feet above the driveway on the east side would be our idea.
Why can't the design of the house fit in the setback area? I understand your issues, but why can't you design a house that fits in the setback?
In general, what we're doing, we don't want a staggered plan. We want the image drawn, which is in keeping with, it's not that you can't, in keeping with the 40 to 45 foot that exist on most all colony lots off the 66. When you subtract the 13 driveways on one side and the 10 on the other, you're in that same thing. When I designed the house on here, we're about 5 feet short of that typical, believe it or not, with doing the practical things to protect the trees on both sides. And, in our view, the easement is an easement, but it's not a street and it's not open. I'm in total agreement of not affecting side yards that everyone has. I just think this is a unique parcel with an easement that doesn't have the street and the trees, and taking in all the design parameters that we deal with on every project.
And what is the overall lot size on this one?
It is 80, as Hunter mentioned, and it's, let's see if I can find it.
lot width is 80 feet, right?
Yes, sir, it is 80 in width. And I think it's, let me see in my file if I can find a dimension on it. I don't see it on this survey. Again, 30% of that is what we're worried about in the vegetation of the gully and disturbing all the gully.
Hunter, do you know what the age of the house of the existing residence is? The existing residence next to it.
To the west.
That was
It's older.
that's a new build, and that came to our Board of Adjustments for a variance when it was being built.
And was it approved?
The one to the west of this
Yeah.
property.
Granted,
Was that one
front
approved?
and side yard setback.
So there was a change to the amendments.
To
The
the
way our ordinance used to read, if you had a variance, if you had a stoop into a side setback that was 6 foot wide, well, that was an existing, you could follow the whole building line. We made a amendment to the zoning ordinance that you can't, certainly leave that there. We won't ever make you tear it down, but you can expand that either horizontally or vertically, the length of the lot. So I don't know when that one was. Do you recall when that, before my
Maybe
time?
about five or 6 years ago.
So if there was a existing building there, you could come down or really remodel and in effect create a new house. So that could have been a house there that sat on that footprint before the zoning ordinance was in place in the 50s, before the 50s. And, you know, so that
So they got grandfathered because there may have been a existing footprint there?
yes, the way our ordinance used to read, if you had a house that was a nonconformity, so it was there, existed before we had a zoning code and setbacks, that was a nonconforming structure. And if only a portion of that extended into the setback, you could come in and remodel and expand that the length of the lot or that yard. Might be the side yard, might be the front yard, rear yard. You could expand that the whole way. So something along those lines would have, you know, if they had a front porch that was, what's the dimensions, 11 foot from the front or 8'9" from the side, then expanding that was okay. We do not, that was amended. So we don't allow that out any longer.
And I don't know for sure either, but I work for the adjacent property owner, and I'm pretty sure that was a tear down in a brand-new house, because I was always intrigued before I started studying it for this purpose, and how I had never been that successful in reducing the front yard setback, and it was new construction, so
That property was in new construction, and we allowed for the property to be pushed closer to the road because of the drainage in the middle of the property. So they wouldn't dam up that drainage area.
So Clay, you trying to come forward again?
On that, that's correct.
So the hardship on that one was that there was a drainage issue that...
In the middle of the lot.
and you can sort of see on ours how that gully, and it runs under the street way to the east, but how that gully starts to go across them as it goes across us. Those were all those contours and those V's headed to the west. Most gullies in Fairhope are on city property, actually, I think, you know. But this one is weird, it's on our property, and it was on their property, so that's a bit of the hardship. And Donna, it's 260 feet in depth, but I think about 30% of that is dealing with this difficult topography.
And do you know the depth of the gully behind on this lot?
It is 6 feet deep, and I can stand, if you look at the bottom of the page on sheet C, you can see the neighbor built a retaining wall, and so you can walk to it and look down at that bottom contour, and it's about, and you can read the contours again, it's 34 at the bottom and it's 40 on the outside edge, so it's 6 feet deep, which is a difficult parameter to design, and you're carrying water from up the street. And Mike and them were very clear, once we decide what we know that we're doing, that we need to meet with Eric Cortinas, right? Mike, it's that big of an issue that he advised us to make sure that Eric and maybe even some other department heads were happy that we don't just start designing. Carrying water from upper lots, we always take that into account, but maybe on this one even more so.
Certainly on the lot to the south. It's somewhat channelized on this lot, and then you follow that 35-foot contour line where it really opens up in that right-of-way and extends into the neighbor's backyard. It really, that's the collecting area in the whole neighborhood.
The right-of-way is what you're saying?
It's the right-of-way and the backyard to the where you granted the variance to the west.
Okay.
You can really see where it kind of flattens out, and that becomes the collection area.
I realize we're limited, as Frank said, to what the hardship is, but I want to ask a question because I was out walking on it today as well. And just speaking for me personally, if that right-of-way were vacated, I mean, there's plenty of room, to do whatever. And I personally wouldn't have any issue with a setback variance. But it is not vacated. It is an easement that the city apparently, I mean, I personally can't see how you would ever run kumquat all the way through and deal with the flooding and all of that. But is that the city's position, that we're not vacating that? And I'm not trying to, change this into a vacating the property meeting, but just wondering what the thought process is and what the long-term plan for that piece of property might be, because again, personally in my lifetime, I don't see it being a street.
Yes, there have been requests to vacate that. I don't know exactly how many requests throughout time, but they have been denied. I know our Public Works Department is looking at a drainage project right now. I don't know what ultimately that looks like. Will there need to be access roads? Will there need to be, what if that's going to be an open pond type a detention pond, or heavily vegetated? I don't know what that looks like. It's a little premature to project what that might be. But I do believe that the vacation at least was denied because we do have plans for that use.
Right, okay. So it may not be a road, but it may be something else to deal with the flooding, which is clearly a problem in there. And
yes.
Would that be an issue as far as the right-of-way? The setback? If it were approved, how would that change the right-of-way?
The right-of-way would be, the project would have to fall within the right-of-way. So, that those 20 foots are there for visual appearance, but it may be beneficial to not have a house within 15 feet of a detention pond. And that
was my point. If it were magically vacated, then I can't speak for anyone else again, but there's a lot of room there, to not worry about a variance for 5 or 10 feet or whatever. Especially understanding now the setback on the other side. I appreciate Clay bringing up. But if it's reserved as a utility, right-of-way, street, drainage, or whatever, that's a whole new ballgame to me.
And Eric Cortinas is here. He's our building superintendent, so he just kind of screamed name. He might have some more history of that. This is not pre-planned, so is that fair? Yeah. Okay. I don't want to throw you under the bus, but.
Hello, everyone. I did. Yes, there's been discussion. If you look at the from Pecan, and I believe it's Pier on the backside, there's an unopened alleyway back there that tees and dies right there at that Kumquat right away. The discussions we've had, and I've spoken to Richard Johnson. We've also spoken to numerous people in the neighborhood of working on engineering for a drainage improvement project that encompasses that unopened alley behind Pecan. And at the end, the reason the Kumquat side is important for drainage is it doesn't continue through down to the bay. It stops and it tees off there. So they have talked about possible bioretention in that area. They've talked about, I don't know what if the engineering works for them to be able to connect some pipes and try to get it to the roads. But that's the reason over the years, we've had several folks come to us wanting to talk to us about vacating that alley behind Pecan and Kumquat. That's really the only place that the city has any hope of ever doing any drainage improvements. So that's why they've been, we have been reluctant to do that, because it's going to ultimately be for the benefit of the people in the neighborhood, because it is an issue. There's a lot of water that goes back through there. So we'd like to, I know we want to have it so we can eventually do that work.
Thank you.
I want to just mention for clarity's sake the difference between, because it's commonly confused, but a right-of-way and an easement. With an easement, somebody else owns it, and the city has an easement to be able to use that. This is an actual right-of-way. It's actually owned by every taxpayer, and is not an easement. We don't have agreements. We don't necessarily own it. We're stewards of it. Taxpayers own it, and we use those for projects as they come up.
This time, I'd like to open the meeting to the public portion of it. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against it? You'll step up and state your name for us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for doing this. I'm a neighbor that lives downstream from this water issue.
Will you state your name for the record?
My name is Andy Parvin, 104 Pecan Avenue.
Thank you.
You have an email from us. We filled that out before we got the information in the mail because it was mailed to the wrong address. So I never got the information packet, but I knew there was a deadline to send an email. We moved here in 2020, down the street from them. We built on an 8,000 square foot lot. This is 20,000 feet. I would have loved to have done some variances, to do some things that would have made our house a little nicer. One of the reasons we moved to Fairhope was for all the rules, regulations, inspections. We like that. Variances should be very rare for extenuating circumstances. This is a 20,000 square foot lot. What scares us more in the neighborhood, and only 3 of us that I know wrote, but a lot of other people feel the same way. I got a folksy letter from the new owners that I think was dictated by the architect office. But anyway, they said they love Fairhope, they want to be good neighbors. If you want to be good neighbors, play by the rules. Don't ask for special dispensation on a 20,000 square foot lot. Ours is 8,000 square feet, and we built a fine house. Again, one of the reasons we moved here, it's a slippery slope. Once you start granting variances, all of a sudden variances become the norm. What scares me more than this one incident is the architecture firm. They're all over town. If they start getting granted variances, it becomes the norm. They tell their clients, and I'm not saying they did this, but just hypothetically, you can see how it would work. We know how to work Fairhope. We know how to get through the process. In fact, the accountants wrote the application, that the owners didn't do it. And as I said, I think they wrote us the folksy letter, or at least they dictated it. One of the reasons we moved to Fairhope was for all the rules, regulations, discipline. It's a beautiful city, beautiful town. We just moved here. We don't want to see it ruined by relaxing variances. This might be considered small. It's a slippery slope. 20,000 square feet. That's plenty of lot for this small cottage. That's what they called it, a small 1.5-story house. 20,000 square feet is plenty. We have 8,000 square feet, and we were fine. As I said, I would have liked to have filed some variations, but that didn't even cross my mind, because we were moving to a city that respects homeowners and has lots of rules, and we loved the fact that there were 7 inspections during the building process. Our builder hated it. We loved it. They inspect everything here. It's great. We love that. And we love this town. We don't want to see rules relaxed. If you want to be a good neighbor, if you want to be considerate, play by the rules. Don't ask for special dispensation on a lot that big. Thank you.
Is there anybody else from the audience that would like to speak for or against this project? We'll close the public portion. Is there, board, any discussion with board members?
Nope.
Your motion.
You're looking for a motion?
Yes.
Motion to deny.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, we'll take a roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Motion is denied, voted unanimously.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
time.
Second order of business is BOA 21.12. It's a public hearing to consider the request of John Hanley to allow for a 9-foot side setback variance for the property located at the northwest corner of Yonge Street and Fairland Avenue.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is R2 zoning. Mike, if you go ahead and get to the slide. The map on the left is our zoning ordinance. I want to kind of point out here, because the colors are kind of muddled, but across the street and to the south, that is our, when we draw these maps, that is unzoned area. So just for point of clarification, this is where our city limits weave in and out. The image on the right shows the lot as it existed. The arrow there it's been thinned out a little bit, I believe, but other than that, it's both this lot and the flag lot surrounding it are undeveloped, nothing built on it, and it is wooded area. As you can see, the bolded line here is the lot in question. It's unusual to see a lot this size. It's 59 feet by 102 feet, and even by its creation. It was done in '87. It's not something to fix, but even its creation was technically a legal subdivision back in the day. It is what it is. We can't fix the things of the past, but this lot and the ones surrounding were illegal, but they're owned by different owners, so the variance request of a lot that is substandard, back on up, Mike, let's get to this one for a second. It is an undersized lot, so one of the things we look at in a hardship is it a substandard lot? We have a lot of those, but is it unique to this property? So if every lot around there is 66 feet wide, it's not unique. We've heard us say that time and time again. This is unique. There is a very small lot here, and by its nature, it is also, like the case before this, is on a corner lot. So there's a 20-foot setback, street side setback, 35 front and rear. The front here is Yonge Street to the right in the image. So the request was a deck extending to 1 foot from the property line. And I think if you'll get to the elevations, that says it best. The elevation on the top right, shows that deck, if you will, on the right-hand side, and you can see that flipped on the elevation below. And when we had some conversations here, because we allow stoops, staircases to go in the setbacks, as long as they're uncovered. And typically that's a 5-foot wide stoop and access. So one of the reasons for hardship here, and one of the things that kind of worries us being, especially 1 foot from the property line, this was emergency access. Well, there's no stairs shown. I don't know how you're supposed to get from that deck to the ground floor. So if you add that, what then happens within the setback? Where is that located? So I think in this case, staff acknowledges a hardship, but we cannot support something 1 foot from a property line. Even though that's the pole of a flag, we don't know what, we can see whoever owns that has a legitimate right for a hardship too, and what's their request going to be. So while staff would usually look at a staircase and a stoop, if you will, to be allowed within that 5 foot of the property line in this area as long as it's uncovered, I think the question becomes, okay, can that stoop be 30 foot long to had and we looked at different options, is that reduced in size? Does it become almost a Juliet balcony where doors open and you have a rail, but then a stoop in one area? We think there's some options, but just couldn't support the 1 foot from a property line. So I do acknowledge there is a hardship on this lot based on the size, but what the solution is I think up for the board to weigh out and help us get to a solution.
So the house is fine without the stoop?
That's
I mean,
correct.
there's
Mike,
no-
you'll go
no
back
issues
to
with
the
setbacks on the house and,
Yep, right there, the house is within the setback. As long as, and there would be one, it's not planned, you couldn't with the decks proposed, but as long as there's no driveway on that side, which would push that setback to 15 feet, the house fits within the principal building area, just fine.
The house actually, the outline of the house actually is the setback lines on all four sides.
Pretty much, exactly.
And so, I mean, would you support a deck on the Yonge Street side, for example, where you have a 35-foot setback?
I wouldn't on the front, personally. If we were going to go that route, I would think the rear might be
Who's got the
more
driveway
appropriate.
over
But, that might be kind of pushing back. And again, we don't, there are trees and things on this. I think that would come into play, but we don't know where those are. We're not mapped out. And I don't know if there's any, what quality of tree is on the site.
What is the setback on the west side?
Make sure, 35 in the rear. So it's 35 front and rear, and then 20 on the south, 10 on the north.
So without changing the floor plan of the house, I know you've sent the floor plan of the house, but it looks like if they built like on that north side, if they built like a 4-foot walkway that got them around to the west side of the house, where the back side of the house, where they could put a real deck, that might be something they could pursue.
I think that's something that, what we are looking at, 1 foot to the property line really creates some headaches
Yeah,
for
that's what I'm wondering.
safety.
So if they get a 4-foot,
Yeah.
the site's very constricted, right?
Absolutely.
So the house takes up the whole site, really.
Yes.
And so a deck is not a bad thing. I'm just trying to think of a way that they could get it
Yeah.
without redesigning the house.
Right.
You know?
And the problem with just the flip, then you've got to get a side or street side variance as well, because it's going to be 32 feet, and if 29 fits them perfectly in there, well, then you're looking at a setback on one side and the rear to get that porch. So there's, multiple variances into play, and I'm not saying that's an option.
So on the west, if you had a 35-foot setback, which you have, and you put the deck over there at 10 feet, and because it's a hardship, is it more inclined to allow that one to pass rather than being within 1 foot?
Yes. We do not, that then there's at least, there becomes potentially another problem, but that's not being proposed right now. When an accessory structure, if it's ever proposed, those have to be 10 foot off principal areas, so that might, crunch things up where another variance was required in the past, but for what is being proposed, I think that's a better solution.
So in this situation, if we deny it, can they bring it back in with a different request on the variance?
If you deny this, they cannot bring back another variance request on this piece of property for 365 days.
How we haven't heard from the applicant. Maybe you ought to do that.
Right. Well, and so typically when there's a public hearing, if you open the public hearing, you kind of have to make a decision. You can make a decision to table this and give them a chance to bring back some drawings that reorients it that one time. So, and with the applicant's permission, you can continue that tabling. It's sometimes easier if that's the direction you want to go. Before you open a public hearing, express that to the applicant and request them to table it, to redraw something, and then there's no deadlines if they need to take 2
If
months.
the applicant comes up here, it's a public, you consider it a public.
It's not a public hearing until the applicant gets a chance to speak
Okay.
after me.
Right, okay. So we
And
can
then
hear
you'll
the
open a
applicant.
public hearing.
We can
So-
hear the applicant and then.
So could the applicant request to withdraw his motion, withdraw his,
Table.
I would request, the appropriate language would be tabling that one, not
Just-
not withdrawal,
not withdrawing.
because that would require a new application, and we don't want to put them through that. I mean, no, I personally don't. Okay?
thank you. So at this time, would the applicant like to come to us? Yeah, you'll state your name,
That runs with the land, just we see it there.
Right.
It could be
Hi, my name is John Hadley. I'm the applicant here, and it's a very unique lot. It's only 6,000 square feet. The house is the house fits perfectly on it. It took a long time to find a house that would fit on this unique little lot, and it's only 928 square feet, but it's 2 stories, so we got about 1,300 square feet. So the goal is to add a few more square feet to the house to make it more comfortable to live, and so the deck would be about 200 square feet. And I didn't really know how to fill out the application, whether it was to take the house and have 5 feet on one side and 4 feet on the other to center it more. But I would be open to your ideas about moving the deck. I didn't know about if it's a fire escape, if we should put stairs or a rope ladder, but it is a unique little house. It's going to be brick, so it'll be very nice looking. There are a few trees in the back. They're small trees, which will be remaining, and it is wooded around it. The other area there, the driveway area, the flagpole, as you called it, with where the house is now, it would still be 47 feet over to the structure on that side. If we do center the house, it'd be 59 feet, so it's not like we're crowded or anything there. It's all wooded. Can I answer any questions?
So would you be opposed to tabling this?
I don't know
To be able to speak
you know,
with
I'm
the
new to
city?
this, I don't know how that works, whether we should, I mean, what we'd probably do is just, not build the house or try to,
Well, if you tabled it, to give you an opportunity to work with Hunter about where, if you said you were amenable to moving the deck.
sure.
If you moved it to the back property
We
line.
would be open to, shifting the whole house 5 feet towards Fair Lane, which would give you more room in the back, making the deck a different size, whether we shrink that deck a little bit.
I don't think you can.
I don't think you can
You can
move the house. yeah.
because of the setbacks.
Right, it would be, instead of a setback on one side, it would be 5 feet on one side and 4 feet on the other side, so that's 2.
Well, actually, what they're trying to do is, on the 35-foot setback you have on the west, take up some of that space, so you're still pretty good ways off the property line. Instead of
Right.
the north side,
Right.
go ahead and bring it in to the setback line.
Mhm.
So if you did that, you could go 10 feet out to the west. Would that work for you? And nothing out to the north.
I believe that would work.
And if you did that, then you just basically have to show that on that drawing, and then come in for the variance of 10 feet on the west.
Yeah, I wasn't the architect who drew it up. It kind of came out of a magazine, and it fit the lot perfectly, so we already shrunk the house a little bit to get it to fit in the setbacks.
So if you table it, then it'd give you the opportunity to just kind of sketch that out and take it back into.
And when would it appear again, or
You
come
could
up
do it
again?
next month.
A month? And so what would be how would we do that?
Sorry, I'm going to come up here just because this one's recorded, not to push you off. So what that could look like if it's tabled, if you could get everything done in the next month, we actually don't have another agenda item, so we can show up the next month for this and continue it. If your architect might need 2 months, it's whenever kind of up to you, but
So
we'd.
basically, it's just, I don't know if you need an architect, just basically take the deck and put it over the other side.
Putting it in the back.
Oh, wait, 1 second, I'm sorry. Are you the architect?
No, I'm partner John.
Oh, okay, well, come on up here. Just, would you say your name, please? Record.
I'm Leslie Dunlap. You're saying that tabling it, you would not be opposed to shifting that deck to the west side? It's still on a variance, but it's on that back?
That's-
That might,
Yeah, and that, as drawn, that would be a comfort level. I worry a little bit about taking the whole house and rotating.
No, we're not talking about that.
Because that would be a little too wide.
move the deck. I think I can get the architect to, even though,
There's a window in the back there, there could be a door.
There was, but there was
Yes.
different type windows,
it
I
would be
think.
tricky, but I think let the architect take a shot at it and table it for a month if that
Yeah, I
works.
mean,
Shift it to the side.
looking at the plan, it looks like you could just shift the out to the deck thing over. It looks like you could shift it around without changing the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't know exactly how to fill this application.
I think it's worth a shot
Yeah.
anyway. Yes, it'd be, thank you.
Okay, is that, okay, great. You have our contact information if you want to come in and talk that, but if you think you've got good direction there? Okay.
And do you have his contact?
It'd be pretty easy. That's the back. They could shift this over here, reorganize their. That's right.
Sure, thank you.
So do we have a motion to table this?
I'll make a
Okay.
motion to table.
And-
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries to table it unanimously. Our third order of business is BOA 21.12. It's a public hearing to consider the request of John Hanley to allow for a 9-foot side setback variance. Oh, I'm sorry. We've already done that one.
Let's go to D, Chairman.
All right, number C, excuse me. BOA 20.
D.
All right,
D.
so 21.13 is going to be moved to the end, so we'll be doing BOA 21.14. It's a public hearing to consider the request of the applicant CMI Acquisitions acting on behalf of the owner, C Spire Wireless, to allow for utility use installation of a fiber infrastructure. The property is located at 750 Middle Street.
And thank you, Chairman. I might get called into a council meeting. Mike Jeffries is here. If we tag out, he is prepared to discuss this, just as I will. Just as a refresher, because I believe this is only the second one that the Board of Adjustment has reviewed. The way utility infrastructure on private property was reviewed in the past was it went for what we call 115211 reviews to the Planning Commission. Those were, and 115211 is a section of the Alabama State Code that it gives that authority. Well, there was an amendment made a couple of years ago, right before I got here, that makes those uses, and that's what we're debating here, the use on a certain piece of property. So any property within the city can be used for a utility use if it gets approval through this board. In this instance, the request is a 15-foot screened fenced enclosure for C Spire to put their infrastructure, and without knowing all that, somebody's here when it gets to that level, but we're basically looking at generators and equipment to support that. This is on private property. It is zoned M1, so the zoning map on the left is the property in question on Middle Street. The aerial on the right shows the lot. There was originally what we saw, this was located up close to Middle Street, the front of the road. This use has to meet setbacks just like anything else. So the M1 says it's the average of the two buildings. So if you can see the difference there, and I believe we landed on 45 feet, 65 feet. So you can see the one property really, the building sits far off of Middle Street. So what you see here, and I will say the first or the second revised drawing we saw was a driveway coming off Middle Street, which left the gate, and only a 15-foot wide gate, everything, or 15 wide fence, everything's a gate. There's no opportunity to screen that, that's all it is. So the applicant and the property owner worked with us to come off the existing driveway. So when you're facing Middle Street, you'll see a side of that facility, so it'll be a fence and landscape around it instead of the gate. So that sits 65 feet off the Middle Street right-of-way. Anything else there? Mike, you can flip through. I mean, I can't really overtalk this one. The proposed plans there, we did have we did recommend approval with conditions. There was a chain link fence. Most of these that we see around town are wooden fences, privacy fences, and a landscape plan that, it says planning director, Mike wrote that, but I'm going to lean on our city horticulturalist to approve those landscape plans. But those are the conditions, that the landscape plan be approved for permitting. There is a permit waiting for this, so we'll get those plans and if it's so approved.
I have a very basic question. This is a piece of property today that is empty, and it is owned by a person or an entity in the city of Fairhope, and C-Spire has contracted with them, subject to this variance approval, to use that property instead of building an industrial warehouse or store cars or whatever they could do there, to put this piece of electronic substation, whatever you want to call it, back there.
No, with the only caveat that this doesn't prevent that property owner from doing something else with the rest of the property.
In front of it. I mean,
Probably
between it and, okay.
Behind, because of their setback, unless something changed. It could be in the future, the building next to them goes forward, which would allow them more room in front of this, but certainly as it sits today, there's still room behind this, away from Middle Street, that still has some usable area that could be used for something else. It could be an additional warehouse, it could be some building to the rear of this location.
So is Mr. Ratcliffe the owner of the property?
No, he is the applicant with C-Spire.
Okay,
And
well, that's why I'm a little confused why C-Spire, this is just for my education, I'm sorry to waste your time, but I was wondering why they are making the application rather than the property owner.
So they're the one using this that can speak to the details about that. That's commonly what we do see, even with subdivisions and things like that at Planning Commission. There's a contract between a developer and a property owner, and typically you'll see
when that
the
happens, they will come
applicants.
speak.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I was catching up. Sure. Thank you.
No, good question.
Hunter, I had a question. So in the staff recommendation, Part 2, you wanted be approved by the city horticulturist?
We're one in the same with the tree ordinance, so it's okay to leave it planning director. But if you want to be clear, you can put planning director / city horticulturalist. That would be great.
Most of this is pervious, except for the drive and a couple of pads. Any drainage issues? I mean, the only letter I saw was somebody, and I don't know where he is in relation to this.
That is not impacted by this. There's a floodway on Ingleside, and that's on the other side of Ingleside. So this drainage doesn't have anything to do with that project.
When they go in for permit, it'll be required to do some kind of a drainage plan, right? Runoff.
They're really not I mean, at this level, when they're putting in that minimal, it probably does not trigger any kind of a drainage plan. We have a percentage of lot coverage that's impervious. If it hits that, they have to do site plan reviews. But at this level, you see kind of how empty that lot is. Probably not going to trigger a drainage plan for this level of detail.
Another time-wasting question. Seacoast sorry.
Oh, and pardon me for one
Sure.
second. Is the time up for the zoning change? Did you get notification? We'll get notification. on when it's time to run. Sorry.
That shared driveway, that's Seacoast Manufacturing, I
That's
assume,
correct.
to the west, okay. So they've got an agreement to that. What if that business sells or closes, the owner of Seacoast property changes? How does that affect access to this, or?
That, very good question. So, I think asking the applicant what that contract is, but it could be that we're conditioned that has to remain, or an alternate plan comes back for approval. So anything other than this approved plan has to come back for a second review before it's allowed. That could be a condition of approval, and a pretty good idea. So good thinking there.
This time, we'd like the applicant to come up and speak for us, please.
My name is Brant Ratcliffe. I work with C Spire Wireless, and I've got some pictures here that kind of shows what we're looking at putting up on the 15 by 15 lease area, if you want to take a look at it. Small footprint.
Like a small family plot cemetery.
What we're looking to do. And they can do a wooden fence, or they can do the metal fence there, and they have landscaping around that. But that's basically what we're looking at.
Beautiful.
And as far as to answer your question, so if the property's sold, this agreement would go along with the property. The agreement is in effect until we remove the equipment off the property. So it's a foregoing easement or agreement with the current landowner.
Okay.
So the current landowner owns this property?
Correct.
So Seacoast owns this property?
Yes, they own both parcels.
Okay.
Okay. Missing information, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I thought Seacoast owned the driveway, another property owner owned the
Oh,
property
no.
this was going
No,
on.
both properties
It's
are
all the
owned by
same property,
Seacoast.
whole different story, thank you.
Yep.
But as a safeguard, because
Yeah.
contracts are,
Sure.
and we're not being part of that, it could be that if that happens.
Well, that makes complete sense. I just
Okay.
didn't realize that other way.
Sure.
Thank you. This time, we'll open the public portion of the meeting. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against this application? Thank you. If you'll state your name for the record, please.
My name is Sandra Woodrow. I live at 399 South Ingleside Street. This will be directly across from me. Now, I heard them say something about a chain link fence that would go up. So with the fiber, this heavy equipment, this is going to be a total eyesore right in my back door. There's a company that had leased a house right down the street that does something similar to this. And the house in which they live, all this equipment is sitting out in front of it right now. So this is going to be a total eyesore, and it's not near 300 feet from our back door, not to count all the traffic coming in.
So I think that they had said something about privacy fence.
A chain link fence, that's not a privacy fence.
Well, the wood privacy fence instead of a chain link, isn't that what was right here?
Yes, that's what staff recommended. So if the board approved it this way, they would have to do a 6-foot wood privacy fence instead of the chain link, and then the landscape.
And the next thing I want to ask is that, okay, when you all put the hospital overlay in over there in our neighborhood, it was stated then that anything that came in would have to be hospital related. Is this hospital related? The fiber company?
So, yes, this could be, and it's M1 is the zoning. This would help. C-Spire has went to our planning commission and received approximately 25 miles of new internet provider. So bringing high-speed fiber in, and this would be the facility that all that has to connect to and be the brains of. And I'm hoping
This
I'm
is a
not
new
murdered.
company, isn't it? What company does the hospital use now? This would be something else that they would,
Another option for everybody in town.
yeah. So it's not like they're the provider.
And M1, anything that would be allowed in M1, and any use for any, as we said, any zoning is allowable for a utility use. So this is, kind of falls outside of that. This is, utility infrastructure has to be placed somewhere, and a lot of places, it doesn't even have a review process, just, yeah, sure, go put it there. It's just a building permit. This is a review that perhaps one of the few places that I know that does it this way, to make sure there is a public input. But this is an allowable use in any zoning district, whether it's an overlay or any other zone.
Well, we are in objection to it. Rather happen
Well, to her question addressed to C-Spire, is this, I mean, it looks to me like more of a static operation. Is this something where there would be frequent service vehicles and such?
My name's Adam Shaddix. I'm the project manager for C-Spire, so I can kind of speak a little bit more on behalf of what it's going to serve. These cabinets are probably 4 to 5 feet tall, so nothing would be standing above the wood fence. As far as how much traffic's going to go in and out, I heard that mentioned. There's not going to be a lot of traffic. I mean, when we have an order, we'll have to go and plug a jumper up. But besides that, we're not going to be spending a lot of time at the cabinet once the site's built. We do everything underground so that we don't have anything in the air. So everything that we do is underground except for these cabinet sites. We choose to put these cabinet sites on easement areas so that we're not in the right-of-way. I know a lot of other utility companies love to put them right in the middle, and then they're having to move their cabinets. We do this so we're not, so we can get off the road. And so we want to make it as aesthetically pleasing for everyone so that it's not just an eyesore for everybody. And like I said, we're talking about a 15 by 15 area with a wood fence. It's not going to have noise unless the power goes out and the generator has to kick on. That would be the only, and it is a diesel generator, just so you know. And you were saying, what was your question? I'm sorry.
Well, I was just following up with, to represent her. So to her question about things just laying on the ground, there won't be any excess equipment or parts, there'll be no storage?
You'll have the handholds, which are basically like just a concrete vault or a fiberglass vault where the fiber has to go to be able to splice and put it together. But besides that, you're not going to have anything on the ground except for what's inside that fence. Okay. The actual driveway, we've got it set to actually go over to the other driveway to back out. And then there will be a fiber easement that comes straight from the cabinet straight out to the street, but all that will be underground.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will close the public portion if there's anyone else that would like to speak for or against it. Okay. Board members, do we have a motion for approval or denial?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay.
With the 6 foot.
With the, as recommended with the 6 foot wooden fence and landscaping as planned or recommended by the planning group.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, we'll take a roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Last order of business is we are going to, I'd like to propose a chairman pro tem for Donna to be that for the last thing, because I'm going to recuse myself on that. So, do we?
Actually, that will need to be a vote.
Okay.
So if we can pause for a second and vote just Donna's pro tem for the next case. If you'll make a
We'll make a motion and.
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay, motion carries.
All right.
Okay, we would like to call to order BOA 2113, 56 White Avenue. And
Okay.
can you take it over?
We can take it away from there. And for the record, we do still have a quorum, so we have to have 4 to vote. So glad to see we have the numbers. This is an applicant, this is a variance request from a height limit. So instead of a lot of the things we see, it is in a variance to a setback, there is a requirement within our zoning ordinance that does not allow an accessory structure to be taller than the principal structure on the same lot. So this application is from, on the property shown on the left. It is zoned to R2 on White Avenue. The image on the right shows an aerial from a couple of years ago. You can see lots of tree cover. This is in the fruit and nut, so it's typical tree cover that we're all familiar with. And the elevations shown are example of what the roof pitch. So instead of having a flat roof and having that second story accessory structure, their pitch was proposed. It's pretty slope pitch. It doesn't match the pitch of the house, but is 2 feet higher than the principal structure. I don't think there's really too much more to get to on this one. You know, we know what the lot size is, those kind of things. So the hardship, and you'll see that staff recommended to denial on this, and some of those we're pretty confident in our denial on, and then others we tentatively say denial because it meets the black and white rules and regulations. There is an acknowledgement from staff that, you know, how, as we talked about before, a hardship is sometimes tough to prove because it's about the lot. It's not about what's built on the lot. And we've seen quite a few cases recently talking about historic preservation. We did this to save the house. And there's an acknowledgement that in this case it's true. The principal structure could be elevated to 2 stories, and then this could be done. But as our rules and regulations sit right now, that's not an option. I think there might be solutions to allow things like this with some caps on it, but it would probably take, well, it would take a zoning ordinance change, an amendment. But right now, the way our codes read, there's not a hardship as defined by the ordinances and the case law supporting what a hardship is. So while we don't think this is an egregious request, we think it's very reasonable. The support of the neighbors, and I'm sorry, we were just trying to, I had to check a text there. The support of the neighbors, it's not something we can support right now, but it is something that we acknowledge and could potentially make some zoning ordinance amendments. That's not in place right now. So I did have a chance to speak with the applicant on the way in, and it may be another opportunity to table. I want to say that because I don't want to go up in the public hearing and require the Board of Adjustment to vote on something, because if you table it, that's only a 30-day window, and we can't get an ordinance amended in that time. That has to go to Planning Commission and then City Council for final approval. So we're looking at 2.5 months there, best case scenario. That's better than a year. I don't know, I certainly don't want to say that's what the applicant should do. I just want to kind of lay everything out and what our options are. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Rebecca Bryant, the architect, is here in representing the applicant. So if y'all want her to come up, I'll answer any questions if you have them.
Okay. We'd like to ask the applicant to come forward.
So thank you for your time. My name's Rebecca Bryant. I'm the principal of Watershed, and we've worked with Dion Heisel for a number of years on the primary residence. This is a little bit of a strange situation, and we're not in the habit of requesting variances. I've never been before you guys before, so I'm also, bear with me. Just to restate, I don't want to go through every detail and waste your time, but to restate, several years ago when Dion found this house, we went through the process of renovating it pretty extensively, to sort of, take a Clay City tile home and make it durable and livable. And she fell in love with the historic fabric of the neighborhood and the character of the house. And so, as Hunter said, there wasn't a thought of tearing it down and building a tall house. The character of the lot is that it slopes to the southwest. And so there's enough fall to actually build an accessory dwelling with, occupiable space above a garage. And on all sides, she's surrounded sort of by that condition. So on to the east, there's a neighbor with a single-story house and a two-story accessory dwelling. Behind her is just a house built to code, but house and garage, 2 stories, much taller. And then going down the street, there's lots of historic examples of across the street, 2-story accessory dwellings, 2-story buildings. But next to her, it's more single-story historic homes kind of going down the street. On Nichols, I believe there's a house, single-story house, 2-story accessory dwelling that received a variance to build that way. I don't know what the criteria were, So we struggled to find something that would meet her needs and be respectful of the neighbors and meet the requirements, and just couldn't get it quite under that unless you do a flat roof, which she may need to do. But I wanted just to point out that the top of roof, the proposed design for which we're asking a variance does match the roof slope of the gable that faces the street. The top of roof of the existing home from finished floor is 13'8". It's not a huge house. The top of roof of the proposed accessory dwelling from finished floor is 15.8, from finished floor of the existing. So in this case, we're sort of we're trying to meet the spirit of the zoning ordinance. We're struggling to meet the letter, and we have neighbors here in support of this. She said neighbors write letters in support. I guess our gamble is, do we vote on it and risk having to build the flat-roofed house, or do we table it and work with Hunter and see if there's some way to create an avenue for that's not open-ended for houses that just don't quite fit the regulations but are trying to meet the fabric of the neighborhood.
So I got a
Do you have questions for me?
Great job.
The way it's set up is the main structure, it cannot exceed the height of the main structure.
Yes.
So let's just say you threw a cupola on the main structure, 2 feet, then they both match.
With that, we actually, that's one thing she threw out. Unfortunately, she just finished a pretty extensive renovation.
Right.
Would something like a cupola that's an architectural piece that's not the entire roof? Because, we're not higher than the fireplace, than the chimney.
I'm just asking.
Good point.
Unfortunately, that would just be an architectural detail, similar to a spire on the church. Because then where would you go to the Empire State Building, Sears Tower, each one just kept building a bigger tower. It had nothing to do with the house itself. So unfortunately, we wouldn't. That's not where the height would go from the top of.
And she seriously considered, should we pull the whole roof up? But it felt like the tail wagging the dog. And I don't know, did you guys receive the photographs that we submitted with the applications of the neighboring structures? Okay. That's what, frequently in Fairhope, we find ourselves in this position of trying to explain to somebody why they, as the law's written, we can't do this, but you're surrounded by it. And that's what's a challenge. We're arguing for the preservation of the historic structure being a hardship.
had a means to stand on a historical preservation leg to say yes to this, by all means, at that level, we certainly would. But as the codes are, like I understand, currently written, that's not part of a hardship as defined in case law or in our ordinance to be able to support that from staff.
So Rebecca, I mean, are you open to tabling it right now to kind of?
We are. I was hoping to get the temperature of you guys and see if, since you, I mean, like the planning commission, you don't have to follow staff recommendations, but if you're inclined to follow staff recommendations, we would prefer to table it.
Well, I think based on the regulations, you're pretty much inclined to at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're seeing a
Look,
path
the
to approve
applicant would
it.
like, is that, the applicant would like to speak. I'm speaking for her with that.
Yes, that's
Thank you for entertaining my request. My name is Dion Heisel. I bought the home in 2017. We underwent, with Rebecca's assistance, extensive renovations for 8 months, almost in 2018, and I love that home. I absolutely do. I couldn't imagine living on a different street, and in fact, I'm saying that because the challenges that I'm facing in simply trying to construct a garage with some living space above it are fairly extensive and surprising, both as they stated. And I know you received these, but I'm going to ask too that you look at them again, because I think it's important to see everything that I face every day on my street. And so I am.
house is your immediate neighbor.
Yes. Yeah, there's 2-story and 1.5. They're, immediately, if you're looking at my home and you look, what direction is that? East of my home, it's that. The people behind me are looking into my yard. But I would certainly, if you're amenable to considering something else, I would be amenable also to postponing. Having said that, I've been trying to do this for a while. And if postponement, at some point I've got to tear down the garage because it is, in fact, crumbling. I've had the good fortune of having what do they call them? No, it's like a bee weevil, and it's bored holes through all the structural supports of my carport. So that's got to come down. And then I won't have a garage, I won't have a carport, and I won't have a guest suite. So I don't want to do this in 2 parts. I'd like to take care of it all in one. And I don't know what the reasonableness aspect is, if there is any, to what we're talking about today. So I'm asking that question myself.
Well, I'd like to say it's a beautiful house. It's a
Thank
beautiful yard, and I like your plan. I mean, I'd have no problem with it on face value. And the precedence is something that bothers me too. The fact that you're maybe the only house on the street that doesn't have an accessory building. But as I understand our job, and I'm brand new to this. Okay. So, but we've been charged with stopping that type of thing, going forward. And I only speak for myself, my interpretation of why we're here is to do things according to the code, do things according to the ordinances. And as much as I hate it, because I've already voted against several of my very dear friends tonight, I don't know if they're going to speak to me again, but we want to do what's right, going forward. And I've been trying to understand the whole hardship thing, and I think that's a very subjective thing to me personally, but I understand law-wise it's not so subjective. It's pretty cut and dry. So I can't speak for anyone else, but as much as I would want to vote for this tonight, I'm not sure I could because of the rules that we are, requested to live by as a board. So I think tabling personally would be a great idea.
Okay. I respect
that. Did I say that?
I respect that. I do ask that you look at one of the houses that's clearly a single story with a second story building that was approved, was built. So it feels like the luck of the draw, as you can imagine, being on this side of the equation, saying, gosh, if I had asked a year ago, would the answer have been different? And making sense of that in my own mind is just troublesome. But
I'll even go out on a limb and say if a lot of things had been asked a year or two ago, we might, with a different set of rules, we might be in a different place today, in the city of Fairhope. So But I think it's a great plan, and the fact that you have so much neighbor support is what
I've got great
impresses
neighbors.
me
I've got
as
great
well.
neighbors. I'll go out toes first
So I think,
in my house, so.
I bet, I bet something to be worked out, but I think tabling might be a great idea.
Thank you.
So
I guess
how do
I
you
don't make
wish,
go ahead.
how do you want to move forward with this?
I guess we'd like to table it.
Okay.
Make the motion to table.
I make a motion to table? All right, or do you do it?
Both of you did.
Who does it?
Second.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, is there any old business?
I do want to just mention, I know a couple of you have been to our meetings. I'm using every opportunity. We are in the middle of our comp plan. We're actually in our public engagement phase, so we've had quite a few meetings, and we'll continue that, so please check planfairhope.com. Great information out there. There's a survey to take. It's online. Just to get feedback, anybody that's willing to, any friends and family you might have that want to reach out and do that. And also our schedule for our public meetings are on that website as well. So again, planfairhope.com for anybody that may be watching or watching in the future. So, but other than that, I think we did not have a meeting this next month, but we will potentially have two. This one is tabled kind of indefinitely. We will work with the applicant on Fairland and see if they're going to be ready. It sounds like they got a pretty minor change, so I would suspect we will have a case, at least that one carryover case for next month. Okay. All right. Thank you all so much, and for working in this environment. And Donna, you did great.
I make a motion to adjourn?
Second.